A quiet working man spent decades holding his family together, paying bills, fixing problems, swallowing insults. One night, after being publicly humiliated by the man he helped raise, he stopped staying silent. What he did next wasn't revenge. It was the end of being used. This is the story of David Lawson, a 57-year-old freight driver from Fort Wayne, Indiana. David had spent most of his life hauling freight for a major logistics company. He worked nights and early mornings, the kind of job where your hands get dry and calloused no matter how much lotion you use. He wasn't flashy. He liked his coffee black, his pickup clean, and his bills paid on time. He was the guy who showed up when the sump pump failed or when a friend needed a ride at 2 in the morning. For most of his life, that had been enough. But there came a moment when even a man like David could only stay silent for so long. It was a chilly January evening in the fellowship hall of his local church. The air smelled faintly of chili and overbrewed coffee, with the faint tang of spilled fruit punch near the coat rack. Ceiling fans stirred lazily overhead, even though winter had frozen most of the world outside. David's stepson, Tyler, stood 10 feet away, shoulders squared, red-faced and brimming with anger. Tyler, 26 years old, lean and confident, had spent his whole life being told he had potential, and somewhere along the way, he had learned to wield that word like a weapon. "He ruined my life," Tyler shouted. David didn't raise his voice. Instead, he placed a plain manila folder on the folding table in front of him. The room went silent. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and just like that, the story that had been building quietly for years came to a head in a small, ordinary room full of church members. This wasn't the beginning of David's story. It was the culmination of years of patience, restraint, and what he would later call the cover-up. To understand why a simple manila folder silenced a room full of people, you have to go back a few days to a Friday night at a Texas-themed steakhouse. David had just finished a long shift. Snow clung to the edges of the roads, and the wind cut sideways across the parking lot as he walked toward the restaurant. Inside, it was warm and bustling, filled with the smell of fried food and the hum of country music. His wife, Melissa, sat at a booth, tired lines etched around her eyes and her hair pulled back into a ponytail. Across from her, Tyler tapped on his phone, earbuds dangling, barely acknowledging David as he slid into the seat. Small talk started, the kind that fills silence without touching the tension beneath. Melissa asked about his route. David mentioned slick roads near Warsaw, and Tyler spoke about some new online opportunity he was excited about. Then the conversation shifted. Melissa asked quietly if David had heard from his father recently, and Tyler leaned forward, smirked, and delivered a punch meant only for him. "Dad's doing great," Tyler said loudly, ensuring David could hear. "He just got a new place, a new woman. Meanwhile, you're just here sitting around." David felt the heat rise in his chest. Not anger exactly, but humiliation, like someone had poured warm soda down his spine. Tyler went further, staring him in the eye, and said words David would remember forever. "You're a loser, but my dad isn't." The words hung in the air. David looked at Melissa, hoping she would intervene. She didn't. Her gaze remained fixed on her water glass, like it held the answers to a complicated puzzle. That silence struck harder than Tyler's insult. For a moment, David considered lashing out, but he didn't. He had spent years being the man who kept things calm, who absorbed the rough edges so others could keep smiling. Instead, he picked up his menu, breathed through his nose, and reminded himself not to make a scene. He stayed silent. When they left the restaurant, the cold air cut across him again. Tyler climbed into the car David had co-signed for years ago, the same car he had insured and maintained, acting as if he owned nothing but entitlement. Melissa walked past, arms folded, and David followed silently into his truck. The warmth from the heater felt like the only comfort left in the world. Once home, David stared at the stack of mail on the counter. Electric bill, coupons, credit card offers. Ordinary life. Nothing in that pile screamed betrayal, but that was exactly how it felt. He went to bed that night with one thought. He wasn't just being disrespected, he was being used. Tyler knew exactly how far he could push him because David had spent decades smoothing over the cracks. The next morning, David got to work. Not hauling freight, but doing the quiet, patient work of reclaiming control. He opened the drawer where he kept important papers and pulled out the folder that detailed every financial obligation he had taken on for Tyler. Car loan, insurance, phone bills, storage unit, apartment lease, all co-signed, all under his name. He spread everything out on the kitchen table and finally, for the first time in years, felt steady in his hands. He wasn't a loser. He was a man who had been taken for granted, and now he could act. David started with the insurance company. He called to remove the car from his policy effective next billing cycle, requesting written confirmation. Then the phone plan, ensuring Tyler would have to take responsibility. He went to the storage unit, scheduled a supervised access window, and had the lock code changed. One by one, the obligations Tyler had relied on David to cover were transferred back to their rightful owner. Each action was deliberate. He wasn't acting out of anger or revenge. He was restoring boundaries, reclaiming years of taken-for-granted responsibility. Tyler noticed immediately. Calls, texts, and even panicked messages came in, questioning why David had suddenly stopped covering what had been assumed. David responded calmly and clearly, explaining this wasn't a punishment, it was accountability. By the end of the week, Tyler was left without the car, the insurance, the storage unit, or the financial crutches he had leaned on for so long. He had to face reality. And David? He felt something unfamiliar but essential, not victory, not gloating, but responsibility met with clarity. Melissa finally broke the silence that had defined their household for years. "You've been quiet," she said. David nodded. Quiet, indeed. But now it was deliberate. Quiet was the sound of control regained, of the cover-up ending, of the man who had carried everyone else's weight, finally taking his own. David's story is a reminder that patience and kindness are not weaknesses. But there is a limit. Boundaries exist for a reason, and sometimes